The gentleman's time has expired. Thank you. And Ms. Wasserman Schultz, you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to have this important discussion. Because the fossil fuel industry has a long history of spreading disinformation, both about climate change and the industry's overwhelming culpability related to climate change. In 2019, this subcommittee held a hearing which addressed the oil industry's climate change denial campaign that dates back to the 1970s. While fossil fuel companies have now largely acknowledged the existence of climate change, their disinformation tactics have evolved to include greenwashing and new ways of silencing dissenters. Ms. Padmanabha, can you tell us briefly about some of the greenwashing tactics that the fossil fuel industry uses?
Sure. So the fossil fuel industry, as we've discussed, has been attempting to control the narrative not only through the silencing of dissent, but also trying to flip the switch on whose speech is being attacked. And so when it comes to misleading consumers about the impacts of climate change and everything that is coming out now about how long fossil fuel companies have been aware of their business practices on climate change, there's all of a sudden this attempt to flip the switch and try to regain control of the narrative to, for example, in Massachusetts, file this anti-SLAPP motion saying, wait, we're the victims here. All of this, our free speech is under attack. We see this in different lawsuits that are being brought about greenwashing, about the misleading of consumers to ultimately capitalize on profit. And so what's very different about the fossil fuel industry and movements in terms of the discussion on free speech is that at issue for the fossil fuel companies is there's an actual profit. There's an actual commercial interest. The attacks on movements are about building a movement, educating the public, organizing. And so these are very, very different issues that I think the fossil fuel company is trying to combine.
Thank you. Really, SLAPPs and anti-protest laws are new forms, as you are mentioning, of dis and misinformation that are spun by the fossil fuel industry. By preventing opposing views from being heard, the fossil fuel industry is making sure that their narrative dominates above all others. Again, Ms. Padmanabha, how do SLAPPs affect environmental activists' willingness to speak out against the fossil fuel industry?
Oh, they have a tremendous impact. I mean, you know, any of us can imagine one day waking up and having a $300 million lawsuit served on us. I mean, what would that do? And the thing that is so problematic about SLAPPs, it's the mere filing of the suit that creates the chilling effect. And I think that that's what we really need to keep in mind. Because in our case, for example, our first SLAPP was filed in 2016. We're still fighting this. I mean, the cost, even though ultimately whether truth is proven, to get to the point of actually proving the truth that your free speech is being attacked, if there is no anti-SLAPP statute, you have to undergo years and potentially millions of dollars of litigation. So to an individual, and I think an important point is that most SLAPPs are not filed against big organizations. They're filed against individuals who are trying to protect their water, protect their land from developers. That is the history of the SLAPP suit. And so those stories don't get the attention because the mere filing of the suit, when they think about having to put food on the table, it silences them. They need to think about the ability to survive.
Thank you. Another predatory tactic is to deploy so-called critical infrastructure laws to ratchet up criminal penalties and fines against protesters. So these are post-9/11 statutes that purport to protect all of our vital resources like food and water and communications, but these are often vaguely drafted laws, basically that shield fossil fuel companies from environmental protests. For example, in Texas, prosecutors tried to charge Greenpeace protesters with felonies for disrupting a bridge over an oil shipping channel. But without this critical infrastructure law, these would just have been misdemeanors. So Ms. Page, I'm going to ask both these questions, Mr. Chairman, if I could have the indulgence of them both answering. Ms. Page, how do anti-protest laws disguised as critical infrastructure laws affect the same willingness to speak out? And Ms. Whitehat, how have these laws in Louisiana changed your approach to activism?
Thank you, Representative. Absolutely, these laws have had a dramatic, can have a dramatic chilling effect on people's willingness to speak out. They're a combination of extreme penalties, as you said, felony penalties in many cases, often with many years of prison as a potential punishment, and then these vaguely drafted criminal offenses that can cover constitutionally protected speech. I mean, I think about the woman, and I believe she was a member of the White Earth Nation, who was demonstrating against construction of a new pipeline. She was near the construction site, but not purposefully on pipeline property. And she saw a rare plant that she just read about and walked over to get a closer look. And it turns out just those few steps took her over the property line, and now she faces thousands of dollars in fines and potential jail time. So you think about what it says to the average citizen who sees these laws, these draconian penalties, how sweeping the laws are, and imagine the impact that has when you're thinking about whether or not to exercise your First Amendment rights, knowing that you can be caught up in those kinds of penalties, even if you're trying to stay within the bounds of the law.
Thank you. Ms. Whitehat? Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind
Please.
allowing Ms. Whitehat. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of how it affected my activism, it was very stressful to have those charges hanging over my head for 3 years, and like every day wondering if they're going to come knocking on the door to take me to jail and having to make plans for my children, etc. But in terms of just being out there and going out, it really is a chilling effect on us as frontline organizers, not just for us to be able to go and do the work that we do. It also impacts other First Amendment rights like freedom of religion. One of the gentlemen involved in our lawsuit was denied the right to travel to go to practice his religious activities. So it's not just that it quells our activism, but it also hurts other parts of our First Amendment rights as well.
Thank you so
very
much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
And thank you, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, for your questioning.